And welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Solutions Not Revolutions podcast because revolutions suck. I'm your host, Bootsy Greenwood, and I am coming to you from Atlanta today, and I'm actually interviewing someone from the other side of the country. On this episode, I'm interviewing Bernhard Guenther. He's actually was born in California and raised in Germany and is back in California once again, but I stumbled upon some of his work on YouTube maybe a week or so ago, and he was nice enough to come on the podcast and talk to me. Today we talk a lot about self-work, maybe some hindrances in the self-development and new age sort of communities, and really get into some really good, interesting, deep, and juicy conversations. Thought it was a really good episode, and I hope you all enjoy it. I got it coming up right now, right after the break. Be sure to check out his website, veilofreality.com, as well as his YouTube channel, which is Time of Transition. And he also does integrative body work. So we talk a little bit about all those topics and many, many more. So stick around and enjoy this episode, Self-Work with Bernhard Guenther. So today on the show we have Bernhard Guenther, and he is a filmmaker, blogger. I've actually put out one of his videos last week for everyone to check out, and I hope you did and enjoyed it. I sure did. That movie that we did was called Know Thyself, and Bernhard, it was sure a great job you did with that video. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on the show and talking to me today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Where are you coming from today?
I'm in Topanga Canyon, California, right between Venice and Malibu, down in the canyon.
Nice. Yeah, I was just out there not too long ago. I worked with a friend, and we all worked on Coachella, the music festival out there.
Oh, right on, yeah.
Built a bunch of that, so I was out there and spent some time in L.A., and I actually enjoyed it. I, for some reason, thought I would hate L.A., but right. I really enjoyed being out there. Other than
I have a love and hate relationship with LA.
So. That's fair enough. Well, your website is veilofreality.com. There's a lot of good blogs on there, and then your YouTube channel is Time of Transition. Do you want to talk a little bit about what led you to making films and doing some activism kind of stuff?
Well, the way it started out, I was always very drawn to write about these topics I got into, and it just came naturally to me. I started to have a blog. And then the way the movies and films came about was actually through a friend of mine, Umberto Braga, who actually then suggested, hey, why don't we make some videos about your blogs, to reach more people on a visual basis. And he's an amazing visual artist, graphic artist, and video artist. So he did all the editing, the visual aspects, the graphics on those videos. And I just narrated my own writings, basically. And, the only other part I did was basically the audio, because I'm a musician as well and selected the music. But it's basically Time of Transition is a joint project between me and Umberto.
It's awesome. It's really great work. I really enjoyed it. Like I see a lot of YouTube videos, I've clicked around a lot,
right.
Following this rabbit hole or whatever, and I was just really impressed when I stumbled upon that, and really grateful and thankful for you to come on the show. So you're not from the U.S., Bernhard. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what brought you over here?
Well, I was actually born in Los Angeles.
Okay.
My parents are German. They went to UCLA, and when I was 1 year old, my parents moved back to Germany because my mom didn't want me to grow up here. So I got a good old German education, and when I was 22 years old in 94, I moved back here because I was really inspired to actually study drums and percussion. And I really, I was a drummer for many years, played in various bands, and went the whole musician artist route, and it was fun, but I also got very disillusioned with the whole music scene here, and and the whole pretentiousness and whatnot in the music business. And then over time I just got very curious, questioning the world as we know it, and actually through my own suffering I was just questioning more the world and questioning myself and trying to figure things out because, life doesn't turn out as you like it to be. And all my, wishful thinking, got shattered. My rose-colored glasses were shattered, and, the whole disillusionment process, and it just dove deeper and deeper. And then I came across a whole new reality, and I just started writing about it. And, as the saying goes, tell God your plans and he will laugh at you. And now I'm here in Topanga, and I also 10 years ago, I got very interested, or 15 years ago actually, in the healing arts like yoga and body work, because I've really had amazing healing experiences with these modalities and found another talent in massage and body work. And so I became a body worker. And that's actually what I do for a living here in the canyon, helping people on a one-on-one basis through body work.
That's awesome. And there's a link to your bodywork site from your WordPress blog, the veilofreality.com as well, right?
Correct.
So people can find you that way. And
yeah,
that's great. That's great. Do you would you mind talking a little bit about the process of kind of getting those rose-colored glasses off? That's something that I'm certainly still in the process of, and I'm looking up to folks to kind of, not necessarily coach, but maybe give a tip or two. What are people should they expect as they're trying to awaken? I guess that's such an abstract term, but to come into the world and see it for actually what it is.
Well, in a nutshell, that nothing is as it seems and never was, basically. And, what I found in my own life, we only, in terms of truth seeking, there's a two-sided approach. It's seeking truth within and without. It's, you cannot do one over the other. And I realized in my own life, or also in others, people don't really sincerely go on the path until they suffer, until they really become disillusioned with their own lives, of what's happening in the world, trying to adjust to a society that just doesn't make sense on so many levels. We are so conditioned from society, culture, and childhood to walk a certain path, and a lot of what we think our desires and needs or wants are actually deeply ingrained and conditioned and not our true self, right? So in my own personal process, I was really came here to the US with a lot of wishful thinking. I wanted to do the music thing. I loved it. I had a great time, great bands, a lot of great creative expression, but there was something else, which was, like in the film The Matrix, like a splinter in my mind, something didn't add up, and I just became curious, started looking, dug deeper, and beginning I got more into general spirituality in the likes of Krishnamurti or even Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, and that stuff, and just working on myself. And then later on I got more into the so-called conspiracy stuff, and really this whole alien phenomenon, which has fascinated me for a while. And, so it just, once you open a door, other doors open and you tumble down. And at the beginning, I was definitely not very discerning, lacked critical thinking. My own, self-work didn't match up in order to take in information more, with discernment and separating truth from lies. I just was sucking everything up like a sponge. A lot of wishful thinking, mistaking emotional attachment and wishful thinking for resonating, which I see. I was totally hooked in many ways in the whole typical New Age teachings and certain channel material and all of that, But that, in my life, again, it didn't really pan out to help in any way, and I got even more disillusioned. I had periods of intense depression, literally despair, not being able to get out of my bed for days, crying, and I didn't know what was happening, And one day I had suicidal thoughts, I was really on a low end, and one day I woke up either I finish this life and be done and over with it, or I just need to figure myself, I need to understand and need to heal myself, And then under this pressure of the dark night of the soul, so to speak, this bankruptcy, moral bankruptcy, what, certain esoteric teachings talk about, really got me on the first step. And then, the universe works in mysterious ways. I found if you truly align yourself with truth and your integrity and truly want to go there, then the universe will respond, and support you. Like the saying goes, ask you shall receive, but the asking again has to be very sincere, and you got to keep trying, going, and show effort, right? And seeking truth and sincerely going there to seek truth obviously also entails to facing the lies, and not only the lies in the world, but that's the hardest part for many of us in this work, is to confront the lies within ourselves, which we don't even know, right? To admit that we have been living a lie, believing in lies and all these illusory beliefs and ideas, and then you dig deeper and deeper and you realize that literally the world is built on lies, the whole society, it's complete upside down. And the more you actually see the truth and walk the path, then you at the same time receive a lot of opposition and attacks from others who are plugged into the matrix, so to speak, because you become a threat to them, because with what you have to say, they are being forced to question it as well, and then cognitive dissonance come in, right, in order to protect themselves from that moral bankruptcy, so to speak, that first step. Then they attack you. That's how the matrix keeps itself in place. The people police each other, right? And and that's what I always say, is like, we talk about evolution of consciousness and awakening, but before we can even do that, even the word awakening implies we need to admit to ourselves that we are asleep in so many ways, right? That we act mechanically. If through all our childhood conditioning and wounding comes up, and I realized as I was working through my own stuff, and there's always still more work to do. I would never claim, oh, I got it now, I'm awake now.
Right.
That's a trap. It's always more layers and subtle things, and recognizing our own mechanical nature and how we, Gurdjieff, whose work I like a lot, he says people are machines, and that's the root of evil, so to speak, the unconscious behaviors of ourselves ingrained through our upbringing, and with people dreaming to be awake, but they're just still asleep, mechanically, reacting to their conditioned personality, which they mistake as their true self.
It's a stimulus response kind of an action. You're presented with something and then you just react to it, as opposed to having that space to know what it is and see what it is, and maybe be able to actually understand the situation, as opposed to just reacting to it.
And and it ties even with basic critical thinking. You don't even don't need to go that deep esoterically or spiritually, and just basic critical thinking that I talk a lot about the trivium, about
absolutely
putting your grammar before logic and then rhetoric. And a lot of people put the logic before grammar, meaning they put their conclusions before even having looked into something. They get triggered by a title. They, fall into a lot of logical fallacies, attack the messenger ad hominem attacks or strawman arguments, all kinds of things, and not sticking to what has actually been said, It's like it's almost just basic common sense. It's fascinating, and like just on that level, we just need to start with to have the right foundation, basically,
Absolutely, yeah. Being able to discern truth and tell lies, that's everything, really, because at that point, for me, like I've definitely worked on the trivium as well. And for me, what that did was it gave me kind of like a lie detector. So now I can look into all these strange, weird esoteric works or whatever, and then I have the tools to be like, well, you know what, that's kind of bullshit. I might let that just pass through,
Exactly.
And then, but still, give myself the freedom to sort of consider any of the ideas. I've gotten involved in like self-help and stuff like that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that too, because I've read some Tony Robbins and, some stuff like that. Really empowering, right? And, very believe in yourself, and you can do it, and you can just tell yourself that you're going to be something that you're not, or something like that, and then you'll become that, and then you'll get a bunch of money, and the world will be perfect. But what can you maybe make a distinction between self-help and something like ego worship? What's the difference?
Well, fine that you didn't mention Tony Robbins, because I totally got into him.
I think he's a great psychologist, honestly. Yeah. Like, he's better than my psychology professor was.
No, he's great in a sense, but tricky. You know what I mean? I think there's a trap in these kind of self-help teachings, so to speak, and I got into him like when I was in my music career, like awakening the giant within, and I listened to all his audio courses and made my goals short-term, long-term, and affirmations, write my goals down in present tense, and yada yada. But what I realized in my own process, like, first of all, nothing of what I really wanted came to fruition, like what didn't manifest in any way, something else happened. And the danger with something like Anthony Robbins, it's, I don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater, right?
Fair.
Truth is mixed with lies. There are some good things he has to say, right? But the problem, like, with that, and it shows also the culture in America, especially, and I just had a talk with some friends about this on the weekend. The whole American culture is like, you can be anything what you want, just go for it. You know what I mean? Just go, make, do, and push and work, and like realize your dream. And this is the land of the dreams, and manifest your dream and everything. And people overestimate, and then that ties into this whole new age distortion of like, just be positive, this whole positivity. Barbara Ehrenreich wrote an excellent book about how positive thinking has undermined American life, in many ways. And it's true because, in a deeper spiritual level, you also need to acknowledge your limitations, to be more humble, to like, okay, I'm really not good at that. I mean, there's something to be said to still work and push on things, but if you so get into this high, inflated state of like, I can be anything I want, you almost lose the connection to your true self. And that's what I realized when I got into these Anthony Robbins style self-help work, that I actually lost the connection to myself. I was going by somebody else's program, what, he worked for himself, And it's ironic too. I was also talking to a friend about Anthony Robbins, you know what I mean? Like, basically he wrote a book about, he was living in his apartment, very poor, you know what I mean? And then wrote a book about how to get into your power and make something. The money he made is just by telling people that,
Right.
He never had any. It's like, it's this whole oxymoron anyway. But back to my point, I just feel it can really lead you away because it, like you said, it really, these self-help teachings, very superficial, ties in with The Secret as well and on all that stuff. Really,
it's just really wishful thinking.
It's wishful thinking, and speaks what you said, ego workshop in a sense, speaks actually to the conditioned personality.
Right.
Like, just fulfill your desires, whatever you want, make your vision, but not even questioning where do these desires come from to begin with.
Right.
A lot of it's like, we all grew up, I mean, no parents are perfect. We all have childhood wounding, where a lot of unfulfilled wishes of the parents are being projected on us. We take this on unconsciously, feel under pressure, and then mistake that as our own. Then our own inner critic comes in. We feel bad about ourselves if we don't accomplish something. And then, the whole comparison in culture, like, oh, I should be that and I need to do that because this is more respectable and this is how I can make money. So it can really create what Gurdjieff talks about, a false foundation, which in the long run will be then harder to break down, to really go to your true self and true essence and follow your true purpose, which is so unique to yourself, But to go there, we also need to have the humility to really understand, like I said before, our limitations. Okay, I'm not that good at that, but I have some talents there, what I mean? And really have a, sane assessment of ourselves. That's what leads us to what we are here to do on an individual level, And that's what I found. I simply through engaging in sincere self-work, seeking truth within and without, then the universe somehow guided me automatically to what I feel I'm here to do, which doors are being opened where there are no doors before, and there's no need for any visualization or manifestation techniques at all.
Right.
Because once you, open the channel and you realize you're a transducer for higher energies, for something higher to work, then you become this vehicle, so to speak. You know what I mean? And it's a step-by-step process, obviously. So there's no need to manifest or go, in this whole like Western way of just like, manifest your dream or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I read a book the other day and it said something about like, the things that you want are being wanted almost, as opposed to like the idea like life is continuing to grow and expand. That's what it wants. So whatever desires that maybe you think you put there. You can't, if you ask somebody what they want, they're a lot of times going to say, I don't know. That's an intimidating question. I don't really know what I want. But when you lie to yourself or think that you maybe want something that you don't, if you have to think about what you want, then you don't really want it. The thing that you want should be just naturally, coming up, and then you act on that, and so on and so on. So there's really no, like dream journal or vision board or any of that, because if you need the things that you need to get what you need done, sure, act in faith, and hopefully those things will come about. They'll be there for you. But at the same time, you don't need to imagine all this stuff in order to get to the next place where you're trying to go to, wherever that's going to be.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's a very good point you make there about thinking about it, and you know what I mean, like how our mind can trick us, with all the thoughts we have, and even decision making process. And I realized in my life when I make decisions or wants just based on my mind of what I should do or what I should want, and all the mind, and I have disconnected myself from my body, from emotions, from my inner knowing, from my gut feeling, I got into trouble. The biggest decisions I have done in my life, even moving here to LA or then later to Topanga, becoming a body worker, like bigger decisions in my life were not a thought process in the sense like, oh, I want this, should this. It's a whole full embodied experience. We just like, no, I know this is what I need to do, or it needs to be done. You almost put yourself out of the equation, and you're just like, wow, I need to go there. And it's that's, I feel, what intuition is a full embodied knowing,
Yes.
which you cannot just rationalize with your mind.
That's very powerful. Yeah. It's like, you don't really need a strategy, like the strategy is kind of what gets, like you said earlier in the episode, when we make plans, God laughs,
Right.
You have this big extensive strategy and like everything's going to go ... right down the outline,
Yeah.
That's never going to happen that way.
And that's a trap of also our physical illusion, the trap of thinking in linear time. Like when I do A, then B should happen, then C, and all of that. I'm not saying that it's bad to plan. Obviously, there's value in that, obviously, but we can get very trapped into this tunnel vision of linear time, and our perception is so limited of what we can see, and and sometimes bad things happen, which actually are meant to happen in terms to break something down for something new to emerge, right? On the same token, just because something quote unquote good happens, doesn't mean it's necessarily good for our sole purpose. That's where a lot of ego hooks come in, like people flatter us, career opportunities where we just go by like monetary concerns or image concerns and all of that, and not really stay true to our integrity, so to speak.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really good. So the whole like New Age thing, that was another thing. We kind of started to talk about that a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you about that. What are some of the traps that you've personally encountered in the New Age movement?
Well, the big thing, the term New Age movement, it's kind of, we just need one definitional word to kind of encapsulate one of the typical traps of pseudo spirituality, so to speak.
Okay.
So that's in a way I use that term, but the big one is, the misunderstanding of what is positive and negative, the over focus on positivity to just, which is also the misunderstanding of what Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, I'm just being how I want to see the world, instead of, like there's something deeper behind it. And, just only focusing on the good things and positive things, ignoring the negative, which creates imbalance. Which even gives the dark or the evil, whatever, even more power, because it's unacknowledged. And even in light of Jungian psychology, the shadow grows deeper and deeper and bigger and bigger, and eventually it will come out in other ways, personally and collectively. Yeah. And then go ahead.
Oh, I was actually just thinking. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was thinking of an old movie that I used to watch when I was a kid, and it was The Never-Ending Story. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, it's a German.
Yeah, with Atreyu and the big dragon. Well, he talks about like how when people don't dream or whatever, it creates the nothing.
Right.
I kind of was brought to that when you said something about ignoring the negative, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because it's being ignored. So I don't know why I was brought back to that, but but it's kind of the same idea, right?
I can see the analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that just continues to grow the more we ignore it. We need to focus our attention.
Imbalance. It's actually not spiritual in terms of what the ancient esoteric teachings talk about. It's actually what we see in the New Age and pop spirituality these days is literally basically the opposite of what of many of the ancient teachings have talked about. A lot of this knowledge has been suppressed, distorted, and because suppression of knowledge is the name of the game, right? That's how people are being hooked. And also the best to control people is through, not just feeding lies, but truths mixed with lies. And it's easier to swallow a lie if it's sandwiched between some truth, because people are discerning. And especially in New Age, another fallacy is this overly focus on emotions and heart-centered and think with your heart and the demonizing of the mind into intellect. And again, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We obviously need to, quote-unquote, open our heart, work on an emotional center. But we need to, again, bring all centers in balance. You cannot demonize the intellect. We need critical thinking, understanding, and not just think with our heart is horrible. Think with your mind. Use it for what it's there for, with critical thinking, and feel with your heart. Mm-hmm. Use both logic and intuition to assess what's best and what not, instead of going just by this emotional, just go by whatever you feel like. No, emotions are important, but they can be also very deceiving, right?
Absolutely.
Goes back to the idea of resonating. I fell into this trap, mistook resonating for emotional attachment and wishful thinking. A lot of New Age type people say, I resonate with this channel material, I resonate with that. But in the end, it's not much different what they experience than, fundamentalist Christians who resonate with the Bible in the literal term. It's also this emotional attachment and projection, right? Mm-hmm. So again, there's truth to resonating, but it happens really coming from our true self when we work on ourselves. Cut through the illusions, the lies we tell ourselves to become more emotional. Mature, and also use critical thinking, and then we tap more into this intuitive resonating knowing, and can really also use intuition beyond the five senses, right?
Absolutely. So you're saying it's not either or, it's both. You don't just
exactly.
It's not a feeling and it's not a thinking. People get whacked out of balance either way.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. I've done it many times. It's like I'm like a pendulum swinging sometimes.
Yeah, same here. I'm just like, oh my God. And then I realized, oh my, what was I thinking? That's horrible. And then, the third biggest fallacy is the whole very oversimplified, distorted idea about you create your own reality.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it's the whole idea that as if you live in promotion of solipsism,
Right.
The idea that just your mind exists and you just create your own reality by what you focus on, the thoughts you have, the emotional state you're in, and whatnot, which makes no sense. And it's a distortion from the esoteric teachings, because there's truth in how we create our own reality, but it's not just it's not about this subjective projection of your vicious ideals and just manifest them and just ignore everything else. And then even claiming this, victim blaming to extreme, that everybody's, if you just think of it, common sense, what a lot of these diehard you create your own reality people basically are saying is that every rape victim, attracted, obviously, the rapist. Or even like war, the Iraqis, the millions that have died since the Bring Freedom to Iraq operation,
right,
have attracted, the Americans, the Holocaust or the Native Americans. It's like, and I was so amazed when I read, I forgot this woman who produced The Secret. She's an Australian, whatever name, but she literally said, and I have a quote from her somewhere, regarding the tsunami in 2004, I think it was the tsunami, that the 200,000 people that were on the same frequency and created and attracted this event because of their thoughts and frequency. That's insane,
Yeah,
it's such ignorance and arrogance. And in the end, it's like, but it's a perfect setup, you can see like how this works for the powers that be, and like, because it, just, I'm not going to look at this. That's their reality. Here's just my reality and whatnot, And, when you look deeper into it, actually, the way we create our own realities by becoming more objective of ourselves and the world, to align ourselves more with how the universe sees itself. I'm not saying never will be able to clearly see objective reality as it is on our level. That's not the point, right? But it's a process, and that's what evolution of consciousness is about, to know more together, to understand more, to see more things as they are, within and without. Mm-hmm. And then the more we become objective with ourselves and the world, that's how we raise frequency. That's how we actually have more access to the creative energy of the universe. And then we become creative transducers of this energy, you know what I mean? And create more in alignment with the universe, how it sees itself, and create true change and lasting, change, in the sense that is in alignment with quote unquote divine will.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. I learned a lot from Mark Passio's work. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he talks about the will a lot.
Right. It's funny you mention it, because I just had this huge discussion about his work, and I got into him too some time ago, and I like what he has to say. Many things are right on, but that's probably a whole discussion on its own. But there's there's some red flags in his work, especially like with himself, and like I feel he overestimates himself the way he comes across, like I know this is the truth, and I'm the authority, and I've worked through all of this, and I don't really want to be doing this, but somebody needs to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I
his
appreciate it.
Presentation's interesting for sure. He's definitely not a people person.
I know. And that's fine. I appreciate his passion and fire. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But again, for me, truth is mixed with lies. He lays some really good basics down, but I can see there's it's almost falls in the trap of oversimplifying things, because there's way more to it. But he has some good things to say. His New Age bullshit series is funny and amazing in many ways, and lines up with what I have to say. And so yeah.
Yeah, one point that he made that I really, really liked. He was talking about the distinction between will with a lowercase w and will with an uppercase w, and like in the spiritual and esoteric teachings, that will being like the universal will with the uppercase w, and then the smaller one being the egoic will. And I thought that was a really good distinction. Right. And sort of, we started talk a little bit about that earlier in the episode, where what you want, you don't know what you want, but you know what you want, because it wants whatever it is, seeking that fuller expression, Right. So I think that's a really interesting way to identify in some of those older books and stuff, like when they're making that distinction between the will and the will with a lowercase w, like like the Transcendentalists, huge influence on. I'm huge fan of Emerson, and he'll talk about that a lot in his works, and I'm a huge fan of that, and that's really seeking something deeper than the self, than the ego or the self. But I want to talk a little bit more about that process of self-work and self-discovery, and specifically like the suffering that led you to really start to work and go down this path.
Right. So, quick. I just want to make that quick note about what you said about the small will and the higher will, the divine will, so to speak, personal will and higher will. It really comes down to, in the end, through the process of self-work and conscious evolution, to align personal will with higher will, right? So, you don't take the ego or the small will as the master, and override, but align yourself, and it becomes an instrument to, manifest, or as a vehicle, so to speak, for this higher, quote-unquote, will.
I like it. That's good. Yeah. That's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. So what was your question about, again?
Oh, I just wanted to talk about, the self-work, how the suffering that led you onto the path of doing more self-work, and just really getting a really good grasp of what self-work is. I feel like when we talk about self-work, it sounds really abstract. There's not a lot of practical, advice for folks who...
I mean, for me, I think I have to say what I find, because I've gotten a lot of insights just working with people in my practice as a body worker. I've literally touched thousands of people, and it's not just physical massage. A lot of people are processing, sharing with me their own troubles and what they're going through, and also comparing to my life and everything. I really want to point out that this process of self-work is a very individual process, which manifests different for each, you know? So even certain, whatever, all these teachings and techniques out there, what may work for one person may not work for another, you know, because we all have different lessons to learn and different wounds or issues to work out, you know, or even karma to work out. So I don't think there's like, you know, there are universal truths in the sense that affect us all in terms of how self-work works, which are universal, but then the process itself is different for each, right? For example, in my case, like I've been always a very, very sensitive person growing up, very emotional, just very affected by others' energies. I was grew up alone in school. I was bullied, you know. I had very low self-esteem, and you know, just didn't speak up for myself, and all of that. So this emotional, really sensitivity, but led me then actually to music and drumming, and that's when I could actually like, oh my God, open up a whole new world, you know, like getting in touch with my emotions, which I couldn't express verbally, but through music and drumming and rhythm, and it really like, looking back, I realize now more and more again, the reason I feel more and more why I went the path on exploring music and drums for 10, 15 years was not because my ego, my mind, I want to make it as a musician, that's how I want to make my life living, you know. But looking back, I realized, no, that was part of a healing process. You know, I've confronted so much suppressed emotions, you know, through music and drumming and just letting it out. And it was beautiful, you know. So that was my particular path. And you know, sometimes I think we are showing these opportunities in our individual path on certain ways of doing self-work, which is perfect for us. But again, it just comes down to answering the call, you know, like Joseph Campbell talks about the heroes of the journey, the hero's journey. Yeah. It's about, there comes a moment when you have to answer the call, but there's also the danger of not answering the call. If people just are too afraid or just, you know, and answering the call is this full embodied knowledge, like, okay, oh my God, this is what I need to do. Boom, I need to go for it. Many people miss that first step because they are still so, you know, maybe the call hasn't really come or in the way they cannot even see it or receive it, you know. Even the Bible says many are called, but few choose to answer the call. Right. So the universe always speaks to us and gives us like hints and opportunities that reflect our individual path, which we need to go and confront, you know what I mean? Right. So so in my case, music was really opened up a whole new doorway, diving deep into my emotions, and also through drumming, like it almost like, I even read some research the other day that drummers with all the, you know, different limb movement and rewires things in your brain. I don't know, like it changed my whole thinking. Sure. You know, because I was literally drumming, practicing like 6 hours a day for 10 years. Nothing else mattered to me. You know, that was it. I was just like exploring rhythm. You know, and that got me into dance, you know, more as well. I went, you know, and even like at some point I got introduced to psychedelics, you know, in particular mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, which has been an initiation itself as well. I recently wrote an article about it because, again, it's a touchy subject because they can also be very dangerous, you know, and hinder one on the path. But for me, it really helped me to like realize, okay, matter is energy. And I remember like, you know, when I was introduced then to yoga and body work, you know what I mean? Under the influence, I received my first massage session under the influence of psilocybin mushrooms. Like, oh my God, I felt like my whole emotions and thoughts like being manifested in my muscles and through the, you know, my friend was working on me and just like open everything up, and new insights, flashes from childhood came back. So I saw the whole healing potential, the importance of body-mind connection. So then again, in terms of self-work, you know, that's it's really important to get into your body. You know, it's not this intellectual, like thinking, talk therapy stuff. It's really like, you know, embodiment is really important. You know, I've healed a lot through receiving a lot of body work, you know what I mean? And you know, because so much is stored in our bodies, you know, everything, any experience we had from the past, any broken relationship or even childhood wounding that is unconscious is stored in the body somewhere. It's armored up, you know, so we can help work through this and release through this in a safe way through body work, for example, or yoga, or any other body-mind practices. I practice a lot of Qigong as well.
Okay.
So that is one aspect of self-work, to really get into the body-mind connection, right?
Okay.
And then the other aspect is also understanding basic psychology, like Carl Jung has opened up really a new door for me, understanding the basics of shadow projection, meaning that we get triggered or irritated by others, behavior which we have disowned in ourselves, or we project our own unconscious traits onto others, The whole shadow projection thing is really important to understand.
Can we talk about that? Would you mind talking a little bit more in depth about the shadow projection? That's something that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, sure, totally. Well, the shadow is basic. That term coined by Carl Gustav Jung is that part within us that is unconscious. You know what I mean? That is part of our psyche, but we have disowned, suppressed, or whatever, and we see our shadow on the outside when we get heavily triggered, emotionally triggered by others, or anything, or then we project our shadow negative emotions onto others, for example, anger and whatnot, or shame others or blame others for what they have done to us and whatnot. So, and there's actually too, there's a negative shadow of negative traits. There's actually also a positive shadow. If we actually, you see there's a lot of it in celebrity culture. If people project, worship somebody, put them on a pedestal, like, oh my God, this person's so amazing. You actually project your positive shadow onto these people, diminishing yourself, your own positive, potential.
Okay.
That's really important to keep in mind as well. Shadow just means which is unconscious, not everything negative. It's also your positive potential you tend to project on others by, putting them on the pedestal and whatnot, and diminishing yourself at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. I appreciate you taking a second there to just go into a little bit more detail there.
Yeah. I have to say, I just want to say as well, though, I feel also like there's a lot of truth in Jungian psychology, but I've also noticed that, and I've talked about this in the other film, Love, Reality, and Time of Transition, that, and if you're too stuck to any teaching or technique and try to explain everything through that, you eventually create a tunnel vision. Like even with Jungian psychology, there's a lot of truth to it, but in the end, not everything is a projection of our shadow. Not everything is not everything is part of our psyche that goes deep into like the topic of all topics of other forces affecting us. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's important to keep in mind, like sometimes when we see another person get upset about another person, it's like we actually see the other person as he or she is, and he might be just a quote unquote asshole. And it's not necessarily us projecting our shadow. You know what I mean? There's sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Again, it's not black and white. You know?
Sure.
I feel a lot of people who are too, identified with Jungian psychology, they fall into the trap. They say like, "Oh, if you spot it, you got it." Anytime you see something bad, then this is part of you. You know what I mean? Which sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we can see clearly others as they are without projecting, and sometimes we do project. And on that note, like on social media and all these things, it's even projections happen all the time. Even, it's already so hard in real life. Carl Jung estimated that when we first meet another person, what we see in the other person is about 70% our own projections, wishful thinking. You see a lot of it in romantic relationships where you have all these, oh my God, the person's amazing. And then half a year later, I'm like, who is this person? It turns out completely different, Right. And I see it a lot I'm a lot on Facebook, how people project into other people. They get triggered by other people, what they say in written word, project emotions into words that are not there, misinterpret, get infatuated with people just by pictures, projecting. So that's a huge part. That's a really big part to understand the basics of shadow, shadow work, shadow projection in terms of self-work, of really understanding like, okay, do I see clearly the other person as he or she is, or is it my stuff? What is me, what is him or her?
Sure. I think that's a really helpful question to ask anytime, whether you're projecting or not, just to say, how do I have these characteristics that I find distasteful or displeasing? How am I harboring these, and how, look at myself instead of blaming somebody else.
Exactly. And that's, I had to acknowledge to myself many times, when I got like in relationships or friends, like got really pissed off and triggered and and then I reflecting like, fuck, you know what I mean? It's this, that was me. My shadow reflected back to me. I had to acknowledge it. You know, it takes, that works in general. It just takes a lot of humility. You know what I mean? To be able to admit to yourself, fuck, okay, that was me. That was not the other person.
Right. I dealt with that very same thing too. And, I mean, I've done a lot of reading and soul searching as well to kind of figure out what went on. But I had, you know, a relationship of mine in the past that just went to shit, you know, just got awful quick.
Right.
And really, really bad. I got kicked out of a van and into a car, you know, like it was not pretty. But, you know, as I've taken the time to learn more and understand the dynamics and what my role probably should have been in the relationship, I noticed that I actually made more mistakes. I had no excuse to be the victim, and I'm glad it didn't work out. You know, I'm sure we're both in a better place for it not have worked out. But
you're right.
The next time, I have a little bit more of a frame of reference.
Exactly. In the end, all there's are lessons. You know what I mean? And especially relationships, the universe. If we don't learn our lessons and just escape, avoid conflict, not go there, break up, go to the next person, we will always experience the same thing in the next relationship, in different situations with different people. But the shadow still comes forth until we face it and confront it and learn our lessons and then move on, esoterically speaking, now as well, to the next step.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's kind of like this pattern that you got to break. And if you don't break it, then you're going to continue to just go around and around and around.
Go around it. There's no escape. You know, the only way out is through, basically.
The only way out is through. That's awesome. Oh, man. Yeah, it was Carl Jung. One of the quotes in your movie was... one does not become enlightened by envisioning beings of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
By imagining figures, by making the darkness conscious. Exactly.
That's so good. You know, I really resonate a lot, or I don't know if that's a term now that people are using. I guess so. With the whole idea of like when you're not facing the negative, it just perpetuates. You know,
exactly.
It just continues to perpetuate, and that's a really good point, and something that I needed to hear today. Right. You know. Because like the self-development stuff, it's really helpful, you know, like we want to believe in ourselves, you know, we want to do better and challenge ourselves and grow, you know, that's ultimately the meaning of life, you know, is to grow. So, you know, I don't want to, again, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think it's really important, certainly something that I've taken from today's discussion so far is to really look at the darkness, you know, don't hide away from that. Go ahead and face it. And
exactly.
The sooner you can do that, then
and especially like, you know, what just came to me regarding to New Age stuff, people say just go by what feels good, you know what I mean? And then they fall into the fallacy, just take an information that feels good, and this feels bad, I don't want to go there, which again goes contrary to esoteric, you know, science, almost esoteric spiritual work, because you know, it is good actually to confront the discomfort that happens when we look at certain information or negative feelings, to sit with it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to have a mechanical reaction and just buffer it up through substance abuse, smoke a joint, whatever, or just distract ourselves. You know what I mean? Instead of sitting with it, you know what I mean? And going into this feeling and then realize it dissolves and heals, and then boom, and you just feel even more empowered afterwards, you know? Same with outside information. Like I get sometimes people blame me for being, you know, for fear mongering, you know, spreading fear. I'm like, I didn't, you know, for me, the information is not fearful. If, again, they project their discomfort onto me, right? Their shadow onto me.
Yeah.
In sense, like if you react with fear, maybe you need to look into yourself why you react with fear, and don't project it onto me and blame me for fear mongering. This is just information I've came across. It's pretty disturbing, but it's there to look at. I didn't make this up. You know what I mean? I didn't want to see this. It's here. Hey, you know, it won't go away by denying it. Right. And then even from a shamanic perspective, sitting with the discomfort and not giving the ego and our, you know, with our unconscious defense mechanisms, a chance to just explain it away, rationalize it away, or avoid it, to sit with it and really go there. That's where actually true healing and transformation happens. You know, like even the alchemical process, you know, led into gold, so to speak. You know what I mean? To, you know, learn another lessons, move up another step.
The metamorphosis, the born again, the whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, all of these, you know, biblical things and all this are just esoteric truths and symbolisms, and not to be taken literal.
Totally. Metaphors, people, metaphors. Oh, that's great. Well, I really have enjoyed having you on the podcast today, Bernhard. Are there any resources that you might recommend to folks who are going to be listening to this, or to me personally, to kind of go and delve into this subject a little bit further?
Subject meaning?
I guess self-work, I suppose.
Self-work. Well, again, like I've got a lot of people ask me what kind of books I read, and you know, I'm like at first I was suggesting this, like check out Krishnamurti, check out Gurdjieff, and you know what worked for me. But I have to look back at my life path. You know, again, what I said before, if you're really sincere and just ask questions and put the energy out there, in my life, it seemed always the right book or teaching appeared at the right time. You know, there's a synchronistic happening where the universe kind of guides you in subtle ways, and that's again different for each. You know, again, what got me on my journey and what I've learned that the books came across in the teachings was perfect in my, you know, constitution, so to speak. What worked for me, it might not work exactly for another person. So I kind of hesitate to give specific, you know.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I've found that to be an experience with me too. Like many times I've judged a book by its cover and been exactly right. You know, just in the bookstore, and I'm like, this looks interesting, you know, and I wind up, you know, reading the introduction and some of the contents. I'm like, I'm buying this book. This is cool. You know?
But in the end, like also in my writings or the videos, you know, there's all these quotes from different people and amazing people. So I already give hints here and there, and people who are more sincere and want to go there, they can basically look up, oh, wow, this is an interesting quote. Who is this guy? You know, who is Carl Jung? Who is Gurdjieff? And then one lead to the other, you know what I mean? So Sure, definitely.
Definitely. Well, thank you for everything that you've done. I really appreciate it. I needed to see Know Thyself last week. It just kicked me right square right where I needed it, you know, right.
Nice.
And it was really good because I kind of started tailing off on the whole, like, oh, you know, sort of solipsistic, you know, self-help, you know, belief kind of stuff. And enlightenment or awakening or whatever abstract, you know, term we're going to label that experience is often a pretty dark process, you know. Like it's not that much. It's not always fun.
It's not fun. It's not exactly like people think it's just going to be like the spiritual path and just angels going to play off the harp next to you.
Right.
No, it's a destructive. Enlightenment is a destructive process. I forgot who said that. Enlightenment is a destructive process because it destroys everything that is false and untrue. You know, it's a descent into the underworld. You know, the shamanic descent into the underworld to battle with inner demons and outer demons, and especially once you on the top of it, once you really start to wake up and walk that path, at the beginning it becomes even harder because other forces, you know, who kind of have grip on our world, you know, will try to attack you, you know, even directly through psychic attacks, through working other people, trying to keep you in your place, you know.
And just those patterns just reoccurring again, you know, those old patterns that you thought you were rid of. I thought I was rid of this.
Exactly, you know.
But nope, it's still deep down in there. So I guess, you know, try to feel through it. Just, you know, go forward and
have also patience and be gentle with ourselves. You know, I can be my thing what got me down because I've been too hard on myself. Like, fuck, I didn't get it, and like I need to be, you know, better. But let the negative interject, you know.
Right.
So we need to have patience. You know, there won't be a collective awakening anytime soon, and like, you know, there's a whole other thing. So we need to be patient with ourselves, step by step. You know what I mean? Giving sincere effort, not be lazy about it, but also not like, you know, forcing and pushing things. You know what I mean? And because we cannot skip any steps. There are no shortcuts.
Awesome. That's a great thought, and I think we'll end the show there. Again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. That's Bernhard Guenther. You can get to his website at veilofreality.com. His YouTube channel is Time of Transition. Go check out his movies, check out his blogs, and he also has a integrative bodywork business, and that's at bernhardguenther.com, and I'll put all that stuff in the show notes for y'all. Please do check it out. Bernhard. I'm sorry, I'm having such a hard time with your name. I feel terrible.
That's all right, dude.
I am one of those stupid Americans. You know?
No, it's all good. It's all good.
But thank you again so much for coming on the show, and let's stay in touch and get together and maybe do another one of these.
Sounds great. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.